Greetings, everyone. I'm Larry Williams, the Director of the Center for the Advancement of Research Methods and Analysis, or CARMA, at Virginia Commonwealth University. It's February 27th, 2009, and I'm pleased to welcome you to another edition of our Meet the Methodologist interview. Our guest today is Dr. Johnathan Doh from Villanova University, who's here to give a webcast lecture on the use of spatial analysis techniques in strategy research. So, Johnathan, welcome.
Thanks, Larry.
Yep. Johnathan, I typically start off with being curious about how people got interested in research methods. We know that you have a lot of substantive interest as well, but with the paper that you're presenting on today, which was published in Organizational Research Methods, you clearly have got some methods interest. Where did that come from?
I think, like most scholars, it was really in the course of my doctoral studies when I learned about the range of possibilities and the different techniques and the various tools and mechanisms that we can use to try to illuminate a particular problem. And to be frank, my interest in research methods is really for what they do to enhance our research analysis. I'm curious and I'm stimulated by research methods in and of themselves, but I'm more interested in what they do for us in terms of helping us solve a problem or shed light on a situation.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment because, as it turns out, many, if not most, of the people who participate in CARMA as instructors or as webcast presenters do have this balance of substance and methods, and in many cases their interest in methods is as a vehicle for better understanding substance. So you mentioned your graduate training. Was there any particular graduate level course in research methods that stimulated you, that you look back upon favorably?
Yeah, there was one in particular that I took in the public administration department at George Washington University. And I think even before I knew much about research methods, I could see what research methods could do for us in the public policy environment. And so when it comes to issues like healthcare or poverty or real estate prices, to think about how research methods can help us solve real-world problems, especially in the public policy environment. And my doctoral program was really transcended strategy on the one hand and public policy on the other in an international setting. So I've long been interested in the public-private intersection. And so I was fortunate to take a research methods course that really focused specifically on methods for public policy analysis.
And as you reflect back upon that, were there any particular challenges or frustrating experiences that come to mind?
Well, I was fortunate to have entered a doctoral program in which most of the software technology had been well developed. So we had access to SAS and SPSS and the normal programs. So I didn't have the typical challenge you may hear from some others about punch cards and the like. But nonetheless, I think, like many doctoral students, I found the whole realm of research methods to be challenging, to be rigorous, to be difficult. And some frustration occurred along the way. But there were no particular areas, conceptual or technical, that I felt limited me. But I did find the whole realm of research methods to be daunting.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we can fast forward now to more current times, we're sure that you have considerable experience as a reviewer of substantive papers in international business and strategy, as well as some research methods papers. Would you care to comment on some of the most frequent kind of limitations or shortcomings that you see in those papers?
Sure. I think the shortcomings really emerge from not so much the methods themselves, but the orientation of the researcher. And it is my view that we are increasingly pushing scholarship that focuses on narrower and narrower problems or questions. So minor variations in something that had been found previously. And therefore my criticism about research methods is typically not about the methods themselves, but that the methods may provide some statistical significance or relevance without necessarily there being practical relevance to go alongside them. Mm-hmm. So researchers getting so caught up in the intricacies of the methods and trying to demonstrate that the methods themselves are showing something when we put our intuitive practical hat on, we're left with a sense of falling short in terms of what does this really mean. So that's something that is a common comment that I make when I review papers. You know, what is the practical significance of this? What is the real significance? You've demonstrated the statistical significance, but is that enough? Is that enough?
Yeah. I've heard one of the senior colleagues in our field refer to this kind of phenomena as high wattage, low illumination.
Yeah, well, that's a good phrase. I'll remember that.
So do you have any research methods books that kind of stand out as your favorites, or that you find yourself referring back to regularly?
I guess the Stevens text is one that I pull out time to time. I think that's in its 4th edition now. And I have some others on the bookshelf, but if necessary, I'll go look at ORM and see what has been done in this area. And I hope that others will then look at what we've done in ORM, and then that's another vehicle to kind of figure out what folks are up to and what we might draw upon in terms of our own research.
Yeah. If we kind of step back and take a big picture perspective, are there any topical areas within the fields of international business or strategy for which you think that the methods are particularly good or particularly bad? Or in the area of methods applied to those areas, are there things we're doing well or things that we need to know more about and improve on?
In some other disciplines, it's common to bring multi-methods to bear on a particular problem. Like in marketing, they typically do 2 or 3 studies of a problem, and they use those different approaches to try to corroborate findings of one. In management and strategy, for whatever reason, we typically don't do that. We do one big N empirical study and kind of leave it at that. And so what I would like to see more of it would be papers that use mixed methods, perhaps at different levels of analysis, to try to illuminate a challenge both at kind of the micro and macro levels. One of my areas of interest is emerging markets. And a lot of what I and my colleagues tend to focus on is fairly macro level, institutional level variables, country level variables, let's say, sometimes company level variables. But there's a lot going on the ground too in terms of human behaviors and how individuals and managers are responding to the very challenging environments in emerging markets. And so I'm not sure that it's practical to try to accomplish that in a single paper. Certainly books is another outlet. But I'd like to see more multi-methods coming at a problem from multiple directions and using findings from different methodologies to try to corroborate an intuition or a research question.
As I mentioned earlier, the talk that Johnathan is going to give this afternoon is based on a paper that's published in Organizational Research Methods. Johnathan, could you kind of give a brief summary for our viewers as to what that paper is about? Sure.
Well, I've long been interested in economic geography, and economic geography is really one of the kind of foundational fields for international business strategy. And it sort of ebbs and flows. The interest that strategists have in geographic variables in some periods seems to be high and some low. There seems to be a resurgence. It's a little hard to tell. But as we began thinking, my colleague and I, Jean Hong, about the use of geographic variables in strategy research, we saw a fairly consistent pattern of a very crude, a very simple approach of using, say, dummy variables to code a foreign investment location in a particular region or outside the region. And it occurred to us, drawing from the principles of economic geography, that there were other tools and methods and other approaches that would be more finely variegated, that would be more precise, that would be more nuanced. So what we did is we did a survey of strategy literature looking specifically at the Strategic Management Journal. And indeed we found that while there was a great interest in spatial relationships and geography, that the tools that were being used were relatively coarse. And so we then looked particularly at one paper and re-employed some of these spatial methods to show how a more sophisticated approach might illuminate some other aspects of the question. In fact, we ended up corroborating some of the findings of that original paper. So in this particular instance, we didn't come up with any radical new discoveries, but we did come up with what we thought was a more valid and appropriate approach that we could have more confidence in.
Okay. Johnathan, if you allow me to close with a couple of more personal questions.
Sure.
I'm just curious as to whether what you do in terms of seeking inspiration as you work.
That's a great question. So, you know, like many people, I have some hobbies, and music is one, and travel is another. I like the outdoors, and when I take a run or hike, my brain is always going. I'm always thinking about things. And then I also, back to the question you asked me earlier, in which I was talking about practical relevance, I think in our everyday lives, there are all kinds of fascinating research questions around us that we sometimes overlook because we think that research is getting on our computer and looking at what others have done and trying to build upon it. So for example, I mentioned emerging markets. When I travel to emerging markets, I'm constantly seeing things that are stimulating and interesting, and some of those become the basis for a research project later on.
Okay. And finally, would you care to share what you see as some of the favorite parts of your work and some of the least favorite parts of your work?
It's an easy question because my favorite parts are the social interaction and collaboration, and my least favorite parts are the isolation. We sometimes need to close our door, and that can be intense and productive, but I always enjoy opening the door back up and welcoming a colleague in and talking about what we do as opposed to just doing it in isolation.
Yeah. Well, Johnathan, we're greatly appreciative of the fact that you take the time from your busy schedule to come to Richmond to do the webcast, and also for taking the time to share your feelings about your career and various aspects of your work. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Larry. Enjoyed it.